So the Syrians did not attack Israel, the northern kingdom, again for a while. But the time came when Ben-Hadad, their king, gathered his army and went up to Israel's capital, Samaria, to take it. Hi, I'm Ken Good Evidence, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Thanks for joining us today as we study 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 24 to 33. Verse 25 is most interesting. Aram's army besieged Samaria until an economic depression meant that a donkey's head would sell for 80 shekels of silver, equivalent to $10,240 US. Now keep in mind that the ass was deemed unclean food, yet necessity might warrant the Israelites' violation of a positive law. And with 5 shekels, about $640 worth, you could buy a quarter of a cab, K-A-B, a cab being a dry measure of about 2 quarts or 1 or half a pint, either one. Data isn't accurate on here. No one readily agrees. Of dove's dung. In the margin notes, some editors translates this as discharge, and other extra-biblical sources suggest that dove's dung was a popular name for the inedible husks of seeds. This was also known as chaff, which was primarily considered a worthless product or byproduct of the harvesting process. Chaff served as a potent symbol in the Bible, representing things that are fleeting, like chaff, which is easily blown away. The wicked are portrayed as lacking substance and being easily scattered. Or, separate from the good, the separation of wheat from chaff in the harvesting process symbolized the separation of the righteous from the wicked. Another editor suggests that the original Hebrew only referenced the cost as 5 silver, with no mention of the unit shekel. Now, verse 26 tells us that as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall of the city, a woman cries out to him for help, and he replied, "If the Lord doesn't help you, I certainly can't." That was because Samaria's threshing floor and wine press were both empty. The king's rhetorical question expresses the king's frustration. He had no grain or wine to give to the masses. Nevertheless, he did ask the woman what her problem was, to which she replied as follows. Apparently, another woman had asked her for her son so that they could, get this, boil him and eat him that day, and she promised that they would eat her son the next day. And this first woman agreed to that so that they could stay alive, but on the second day, the woman who had proposed the arrangement hid her own son. Now when the king heard that, he tore his clothes and walked about on the wall with simply sackcloth on him. He was very frustrated, very disturbed, and then he swears, due to his anger of being in that situation, that he would be willing to be killed that day if Elisha, the prophet, was still alive after today, or after that day. Now, meanwhile, Elisha is at home with his sons of the prophets, the NAT says the community leaders, teaching or discussing something. The king sends a messenger to get him, and before he got to him, Elisha says to the students, "Do you see how the son of the murderer has sent someone to take away my head?" So Elisha knew what was coming, and he gave instruction for the sons of the prophets to bar the door and not let the messenger in, expecting that the king of Israel would follow him to Elisha's place right afterwards. Meanwhile, the messenger arrives. But who says the words in verse 33? This evil, here's the words, this evil or this disaster, we must assume the famine, is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer for help? End of quote. And we'll get some help below in a minute. But let's stop there and see if we can make any more sense of this whole thing. The NAT helps us out with our question as to whether Samaria was undergoing a famine or whether one was the result of the siege that we posed above. The siege was intended to surround a city, prevent all business and trade from entering or leaving the city, and to eventually starve the population into surrender. The NAT says Samaria's food supply ran out as it was under siege. In fact, the siege was so long and things got so bad that exorbitant prices, as indicated above, were charged for some things. David Gusick has taken another look at the cost of things. He writes that Wiseman says that dove droppings is better translated as carob beans, and that 5 shekels of silver were more than a month's wages for a laborer. And as a comparison, he quotes Trapp as writing, when Hannibal besieged Caecilium, or perhaps Caecilium in southern Italy, 216 to 215 BC, one mouse was sold for 200 pence. Puddings made of dog's guts were very dear at the siege of Skodra in Europe as late as 1479. Now, the story of the 2 women shows how terrible the famine was. Mothers were so hungry that they ate their own children. Deuteronomy chapter 28 contains an extended section where God warned Israel about the curses that would come upon them if they rejected the covenant he had made with them. Part of that chapter describes the horrors fulfilled in this very chapter that we're studying. Something to the effect that they shall besiege you at all your gates until your high and fortified walls in which you trust come down throughout the land, and they shall besiege you at all your gates throughout all your land which the Lord your God has given you. You shall eat the fruit of your own body, the flesh of your sons and your daughters whom the Lord your God has given you, in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you. That's Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 52 to 53. Chuck Smith also suggests that the woman who wanted the king's help may well have said about the other woman, make her produce her child so that we may eat him. Perhaps, but I could not find any scriptural evidence for that, though I can see that this may well have been her only recourse and plea to the king, given what had taken place. We also see that the king was deeply grieved and angry, but not with himself, not with Israel, or with their sin. The king was angry against the prophet of God and wanted him dead. Finally, Matthew Henry tells us that the last paragraph of chapter 6 should really have been the first paragraph of chapter 7 as it begins a new or separate story. Why should I continue to wait for the Lord to help? Remember, we asked about this earlier. Who actually said this? Turns out that this was likely King Jeroboam asking that, not the messenger he had sent. The king that had come after Elisha had now caught up to the messenger at Elisha's house. Anyway, we're going to pursue this story in our next study. But what's another lesson from this very study itself? Well, at some point, even evil people realize some things are beyond their own ability to fix or help others with. If God couldn't help this woman that cried out, then certainly the king was not able to do so. But God can always help if we let him. He can and does bring peace and comfort even to a parent that has lost her child through either their own naivety, as in this case, or through dire need, or through a calamity like the parents who lost their children in a flood as experienced in Texas this month, July 2025. Anyway, in the meantime, we'll keep on studying God's Word, and I hope you will too. Join us next time.